It's this.
Okay, so if we just move on, please, if that's okay. Yeah, so today I just want to talk to you a little bit about Prospect Change and tell you a little bit about our background and what we do. And then I think Ruth is going to dive deep into common pitfalls and strategies for success, followed by the vital role of PMO. Of course, we're going to bring that in, being advocates of PMO. And then, as Ruth said, we have group discussion Q&A before any close, and talk about a freebie that we'd like to offer you as well today. So just a little bit about us. We normally at the start of our webinars just tell anybody that's new a little bit about Prospect Change, although you may follow us on LinkedIn. Thank you if you do. But in terms of Prospect Change, founded by myself and Ruth in 2022. So we are not far from our 4th birthday in January next year. We are a PMO consultancy and a training academy. We specialise in supporting organisations with their PMO capability at all levels, including project, programme and portfolio. We really do believe that change can be made simple, so our motto is we make change simple. We set up Prospect Change with 2 missions in mind, and one is to support organisations in the successful delivery of projects and programmes, saving them time and money. And second, a passion of ours is to put PMO on the educational map. It doesn't really exist there, or it certainly didn't much before we set out to put it on the map. We do a lot of work with local colleges, especially Bradford College at the moment, and we have managed over the last 2 years to work really closely, bringing sessions about PMO to students in business and project management. And we have helped design a T-level with Bradford College that has incorporated PMO learnings into their course material. We continue to support Bradford College, especially from September to December, with a lot of different sessions around PMO and skills in business. So it's a passion of ours. So we really enjoy doing that. In terms of organisations that we've supported since setting up, financial services is our background. That's where Ruth and I met. But we have also supported organisations in the charity sector, in retail, in hospitality. I always forget this list, Ruth. Is there any more on that one?
I'm sorry, Jen, mine's dipping out a little bit. Can you hear me okay?
Is everybody can hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, universities as well, sorry, of course, in the education sector. So we've done a lot of different sectors, and we believe that PMO can be applied anywhere. Okay, next slide. Okay, Ruth.
Yes, yeah, I'm back, thank you.
So if you're interested in hearing any more about those services, please do let us know. Okay, I think now I'm passing over to yourself, Ruth, to get into it.
So strategies for enhancing change. Now, we are huge advocates for keeping all projects and programmes connected to change. It's very easy for projects to become disconnected from their intended purpose, particularly if they are a long project that goes on for quite some time. It's easy for scope to increase, for scope to decrease, for new project managers to come in, new sponsors to come in, and suddenly you find yourself going in a direction that was never intended. And therefore, when we talk about PMO, we don't talk about PMO bringing value purely at that tactical level. So whilst it's brilliant to be able to provide the templates and standards and structure for fabulous and effective project and programme management, and it's much needed, the real true value is then realised when you take that upper level and you connect your projects and programmes to strategy and to change in order to validate that the projects and programmes you're delivering will achieve the change that the organisation needs in order to achieve ultimately the vision and strategy that that organisation has for growth and sustaining their existence. So we all know, everybody on here is from the project and change world, and we all know the basics. I mean, if any one of us was to start a project, we'd start with a plan, right? And we'd know that we have to stick to that plan, and we'd know we'd have to deviate, manage any deviation from that plan. We'd know about understanding the benefits and the costs of our project, and we'd know about tracking that throughout delivery, and we'd know about managing our risks and our dependencies. So we'd all know the basics of how to deliver projects, and most leaders in organisations know the basics of how to deliver a project. And yet, time and time again, we see change struggling and change, worst case, failing. And things that should take 6 months to deliver take 12 months to deliver. Something that should have delivered 5 million value delivers 2 million value and costs twice as much to get over the line. And there are reasons this happens, and we want to delve a little bit deeper into them today to understand what they are. Now, we're going to share 9 of them, and then we're going to go into the value of a PMO function and why we are such huge advocates for PMO. And then we want to hear from you guys, because this is an opportunity for us all to learn. So as we're talking through the slides, if you could give some thought as to any lessons that you have that you'd love to share with the group, any questions you might have, any experiences, we'd really value and appreciate that. And I'm sure others on the call will, because I am almost certain that our list will not be exhaustive. So yes, it would be great to hear from everybody. If you could flip on a slide. Thank you, Jen. So we're going to talk through 9 elements today. Mistaking planning for strategy, not stress testing the strategy or the change against external realities, misaligning budgets, strategic inertia, so acting just too slow, almost too worried to get off the starting block rather than getting off too quickly. Both can be as damaging as each other. No strategic narrative to the change that you're delivering, undefined measures, knee-jerk responses, not planning for sustainability of the change, and poor leadership poor leadership alignment or no accountability whatsoever. So let's go through those 9 before we get into PMO. So the first one, mistaking planning for understanding the change that you're delivering. Now, if you're project managers, you will often come in at the point that the project has already got started, and that's when it'll be handed over to you. And not necessarily, you may not necessarily have been involved at the point that the change was being defined. And this can be incredibly challenging because you almost have to reverse a few steps at this point if that's not happened. But we have to consider, has an organisation truly understood the what and the why? So what is it that needs to change, and why does it need to change? So before we even talk about a project or a programme, we need to truly understand that, because otherwise we end up confusing movement with momentum. So it's about understanding that direction of travel. Where is an organisation right now? What are the problems that they face? What are the opportunities they have? And where do they ultimately want to be? Because that shapes the why. And so if that hasn't been effectively completed before the project has even been initiated, before you even get to the point of a business case, then ultimately it could be starting flawed, and what you deliver is not what the organisation needs, because they haven't truly considered the outcome of the change that you're ultimately trying to deliver. And therefore, there are some kind of reverse steps that you would need to do at the beginning of a project in those cases. So it's understanding from a measurable perspective, what is the current position? So not just from a gut feel, it doesn't just feel right. That's the starting point, right? But then you have to quantify that in order to truly understand the problem and the opportunity. And then really pause to understand the vision statement and measurable demonstrations of what good will actually look like when the organisation is living in the world of the vision, so they're living in the point that the change is being delivered. And what needs to happen to go from where we are right now to where we need to be? And is the project that you're delivering and managing, overseeing, or accountable for the thing, the vehicle of change that's going to go from the as is to the world of the to be? And then, of course, you break that down into the critical deliverables that will take you on that journey to go from the world now to the world with vision. So what you really need to be seeing at that point, and if you don't have it at this point, it's asking the right questions to get it to this stage, is that roadmap. We're not talking about a plan, but a roadmap in terms of outcomes from as is to be, and then a matrix that connects some strategic objectives, so those outcomes, to change, to deliverables, and ultimately to your success criteria. So what does good look like? And that can be a difficult conversation to have. I've experienced this many, many, many times when I've gone in to deliver a project, and you're delivering a project, but you don't feel like this project is going to realise the change that the organisation is talking about or thinks that they need. And so it is asking those right questions and making sure that's built into documentation and ultimately what it is that you're delivering. Number 2, Jen. And if you've got any thoughts just to add as I'm talking about these, any builds, any questions, any challenges, please do make a note of them. It'd be great to hear those when we break into the group session shortly. So number 2 is not stress testing the change. So has the change truly been tested to make sure it is going to stand the test of time? Because it can be really fragile, and decisions for change are made in a moment of time, and yet often not really considered about whether this change will be relevant going forward in the future. So it's looking at competitors and market shifts and potential regulatory change, what's coming down the pipeline, or what could, based on your experience and the specialists and SMEs experts, SME individuals that are working on the projects, based on their experience, what do you think could be coming down the line as you deliver this piece of change? And then test and build those into the plan. You can use PMO capabilities such as risks and assumptions in order to build those in and communicate them and really test them out. So what risks could the project face? So like we say, for example, regulatory changes. You know, we're looking at the water industry. I don't know if anyone's particularly close to utilities in the water industry at the moment. There's a lot of projects happening within the water industry because it's a very reactive environment. And then there's this big looming change happening around the regulators. So there's expected to be a regulatory change at the moment. They're governed by Ofwat. That'll have a significant impact on the projects and the change that the water industry is currently delivering at the moment. So I do wonder if they've considered what impact that would have on their projects. But if you can do this right at the beginning and understand what could hinder this project in terms of delivery, but also in terms of successful outcomes, and either put them in as risks so that you don't forget about them, or put them in as assumptions. You are assuming this will happen and therefore you're preparing for it, or you're assuming it will not happen and therefore you're moving forward on that basis. And then understanding the impact if that assumption does not hold true and continuing to validate them throughout the life of the project. And if that has not been done and the project has already got off the starting block, it's about looking backwards again. All of these is about looking back. So how can you really challenge the assumptions? Are the right assumptions there? And how will you validate and challenge those assumptions? And has that external stress testing been built into your risks? And do you have a mitigating actions for the risks? And do you know how you will validate the assumptions and what the impact will be if those assumptions prove to be invalid? So the stress testing is very often, more often than not, it's missed out, and it does often fall to the project team, the project manager, in order to retrospectively do that. We'll move on to point 3, Jen. Misalignment of budget. Oh my goodness, this will cause no end of frustration. I'm sure you've all experienced this. So you're absolutely brought in order to deliver an innovation. That's what you're focused on, delivering something exciting and new for an organisation, and yet the budget that's been allocated still represents and clings to legacy ways of working or current ways of working. And the investment really lags behind that intent. Because ultimately, and this is what a business case comes down to, and it's often forgotten, it's not about spending what you don't have. It's about investing in something that you will have should the project be successful and deliver the change that's truly needed. And again, it comes down to really, truly quantifying the as is and the to be. Because if an organisation successfully quantifies where they are right now and where they want to be through the change that will be delivered, then they can justify and understand the investment spend that's needed in order to be in the space of the to be. Because it makes sound business investment. It makes sound business sense in order to invest in the future. But in order to do that effectively, you do have to make sure you've done step 1 and step 2 effectively, of course. Often an organisation, will, again, I'll say it, we've seen it all time and time again, but an organisation will intend to deliver a particular piece of change. There's a project that needs to be delivered. Everybody talks about how critical this project is, how transformational this project is going to be, how it's going to achieve a huge vision or a strategy. And yet the money isn't there in order to invest in the right expertise to deliver that and get it over the line. And yes, it is a balance between whether the investment is there, whether the money is there right now, but ultimately it's about investment. You start a new business, you don't expect to start a new business with no money that you're going to put down on the table for it, but you're prepared to put that money down on the table because you believe in what it is you're delivering and you believe it will reap dividends at the end of the day and that you will get profit from it. And it's no different with a project. And yet more and more we are seeing this being a challenge for organisations. And as a result, it is significantly compromising the outcome that is delivered. Anybody, if we've got any contractors on the call at the moment, we've all seen a significant dip in the contract market. Organisations are not bringing in the number of contract expertise that they did 5-6 years ago, for example, pre-COVID, I would say. And as a result, individuals that are professionals within their own in their own role within an organisation, but absolutely not experts within projects, are being expected to deliver change because the budget is not being put down on the table to truly invest in the future, to truly invest in the to be. So that is something that really does have to change. And as hard as it is, it's conversations we do need to have with organisations to and give the capability through the likes of business cases, etc., to make that happen. So if you've been brought in to deliver a project, or you're looking to get a project off the starting block that you're not feeling particularly confident has the right budget against it, it's about auditing spend against the stated change outcomes. So what is this change intended to deliver from a financial perspective? And therefore, what can we afford to put down on the table to truly invest in the outcomes that organisation wants? And if the numbers are not matching the narrative, then something has to give. We have to start having those really honest conversations, because it's about adjusting budgets to fund the future, not adjusting budgets and allocating budgets based on current state. Point 4, Jen, please. Too slow to act. Now, this is an interesting one because at Prospect Change, we talk all the time about being too quick to act, too quick to jump in, not planning effectively enough, not truly understanding your direction of travel. And whilst we absolutely stand by that, there is also the flip side, the other end of that spectrum, which is being too slow to act. Because even the best change has an expiry date. And if you move too slowly, you could absolutely miss the moment, particularly if you are in a competitive landscape. You must have a plan for a plan. So if you are looking to get a strategy off the ground, yeah, exactly. Well, yeah, public sector, a massive challenge in the public sector. So much red tape, huge amounts of red tape and governance that you have to get through in order to get approval for a piece of change. And by then, is it too late? I suppose would be a good question to ask. But if you're looking to get, too afraid to make decisions. And I think that's the biggest challenge, it's accountability, isn't it? And feeling that you have the ability to make a decision without there being a culture of blame. And I'm not saying that is a culture of blame within the public sector, but sometimes that can be a cause of that. So if you are looking to get a strategy off the starting block, you really need to have a plan for a plan. We love a plan. And before you can get to a plan for delivery, you need a plan to get to your plan. So when will you agree the as is and the future state? Not just based on gut feel, but quantifying that. When are you going to get there and how are you going to get there? And when do you need to have the change defined? And when will the change be approved and translated into plans for delivery? And then attach, if it's appropriate to do so, not just for the sake of it, but if you feel it's appropriate to do so, attach some risks to your plan for a plan. So if you don't hit the deadline for the change being approved and translated into plans for delivery, so it moves from intended change into a project, then what risk does that pose? Is there other competitors that you think might be moving a little bit quicker, for example? Is there some regulatory change that is coming down the line that you have to be able to respond to? And being accountable to these dates will keep you on track and ensure you move efficiently, but in a controlled and structured way. And we love structure because we are PMO. So why would we not love structure? So if you're finding yourself in this situation, if you feel you've been defining the change forever and still haven't got started with delivery, it's about pausing first of all to make sure you haven't missed the boat. And I think that's incredibly important in the early days. If you already know you're working with an organisation, Laura, Will, you both shared it in the chat there, where you do feel it's going to take a while to get this off the starting block. It's difficult to make decisions. There's too many cooks in the kitchen, that sort of thing. Then attach those risks. Make sure you create the burning platform. Why do we need to get off of this platform? Why is it on fire? Why do we need to get across to this new platform? Why do we need to make these decisions quick? If you do, don't do it for the sake of it, because then it's the boy that cried wolf, isn't it? But if you feel that actually we do need to move quickly on this, attach your risks to it and make sure you communicate. And if you've not got that approval, you're not getting off the starting block quickly enough, escalate to issues. And if you have had to pause, is the change or strategy still relevant and is it still worth doing? And define the plan for a plan and ensure those critical decision makers are committed to the dates, or at least aware of the dates, even if they're not committed to them. Point 5, Jen, please. No strategic narrative. This is about your change management. This is about getting people on board from the beginning. Because if people can't see themselves in the change, if they don't understand what it means to them, then ultimately they're not going to be advocating for it. They're not going to be championing it. And it's unlikely they're going to follow it or even be particularly interested because it's not translating to them. It doesn't mean anything. You're never going to get on a plane. Well, very few would get on a plane without knowing the destination. And that's ultimately what you're asking people to do if you're not able to talk about the change that's going to be delivered, if you're not able to tell the story. When it gets to the point of communicating the change, especially if everything's been done right before, so you've done everything up to this point, you've validated it, you've quantified it, you've got the right people engaged at a leadership level, you're going to know that inside out. It's not going to be difficult for you to then translate that and tell the story. And if you get to the point of telling that story and understanding the narrative and you can't do it, then maybe you need to consider that some steps have been missed along the way. You need to get people on the plane with you because they want to, not because they have to. Not because hierarchically they have no choice but to be forced onto the plane. They need to know that story. One that explains the problem or the opportunity that they face or the organisation is facing and why the new destination is one that people should want to move towards. Because without it, there will be confusion, resistance, apathy, and potentially fear as well. It's not a nice place for people to be, and they're not going to be championing the change. So how do you get this right from the beginning or fix it? Build that genuine narrative, tell the story, let go of all the project terminology and all that language that people just don't understand and actually causes people to switch off. Tell the story, even split it out I don't mean in a storybook way, but because we don't want to patronise anybody, but ultimately, where are we right now and where are we going and why do we need to go that way? And describe the outcomes. I mean, what will people see? Not what are you doing, but what is what you're doing going to mean to the individuals in the organisation? What will they see as a result of the stuff that you're delivering? And what projects and programmes are going to make it happen? Share the titles of those projects and programmes so that when they hear those projects and programmes, they know how that connects to the change that they're going to be impacted by. And very importantly at this point, it needs to be two-way communication channels. It's not just to tell, it's a It's a communication, which means you're listening as much as you are doing the talking, because you're talking to the people impacted. Therefore, you're talking ultimately about the specialists within this space. And so they could share with you some really key, significant points that could be really vital to the project and the change that you're delivering. Number 6, please, Jen. No objectives, KPIs. Here we're talking measures. So you're not quantifying and measuring the change. And if you're not measuring activity, if you're measuring activity and not outcomes, you're just counting how busy you are, not necessarily how successful you are. Qualitative storytelling gets hearts on board. It's vital. But without quantifying that journey, how do you know that you're making real progress in the right direction? Because you would not set out on a long drive without checking the mileage, when you expect to arrive. And if you took a wrong turn, you want to know what that's done to your timeline. I mean, I take wrong turns all the time. I'm always getting distracted when I'm driving. And then I'll look at my map and it adds 6 minutes on, 3 minutes on. If you're on the motorway, 15 minutes on. And you know, oh my goodness, is this something that's going to impact me? Is it going to get me there late? You are quantifying when you go on a long journey, that journey the entire time. It's no different with your projects. So quantify your as-is, quantify your to-be, have your SMART objectives to map that journey, and then the deliverables that will achieve them. At Prospect Change, we call this the golden thread, and we love the golden thread because that's the visible, measurable link from strategy to change to delivery and then finally to impact. It's your navigation system, and when it's built properly, it can reassure you that you're on course, everything's going fine, but it can also flag to you if you've taken a wrong turn. So if you're in this situation, you've picked up a project, you don't feel you've got the right measures there, revisit the change. Are you genuinely able to link every deliverable that the project or program is delivering to the outcomes that the project and program is intended to deliver? And if you're not, then you're missing critical goalposts. So you need to get that golden thread established really quickly. So how is what you're delivering impacting the delivering change, and how is that change achieving ultimately what the organisation needs? Golden thread. We talk about the golden thread on pretty much every engagement. Very, very important. Number 7, please, Jen.
Just before I move on to number 7, I've been smirking throughout that because you're talking about taking wrong turns, Ruth. And I think you can take wrong turns with distraction. The time I was debriefing to you on a client when I was returning home from a drive, and I ended up going 20 miles in the direction whilst I was chatting to you. I just thought I'd add that to my laugh.
I remember that. Jen and I don't get a huge amount of time, surprisingly, to actually catch up in person and in real time. So we rely really heavily on WhatsApp voice messages. And it's not unusual to get a 20, 30-minute message from each other to listen to while we're cooking tea or, I don't know, pottering about. Famously long podcasts, and missed a turn just as she started it. And 20 miles in the wrong direction. Number 7, knee-jerk responses. Sorry to go back to that, but it happens when you're distracted. And it's no different in projects. You get distracted by something else that's supposed to be urgent, or you're distracted on an issue, and suddenly something else goes off course because you've not got your focus on it. And those measures are incredibly important because even if you are distracted, it would flag up. Knee-jerk responses. This is massive, isn't it, when we talk about programs and projects? So market pressures hit, and a competitor might do something very impressive that suddenly an organisation thinks, oh my goodness, we need to get on board with this. It's brilliant. And so suddenly, within 3 hours, a new piece of change is drafted up. You've got a strategy, and the demand lands on your desk. We need to deliver this project within 3 months. And that's happened literally overnight. And yes, reactive change is needed, but even reactive change needs sense checking, because any change that's born out of panic, no worries, Will, any change that's born out of panic is more than likely not going to be solid, foundational change that's going to deliver the outcomes that are needed. So knee-jerk reactions are never the right way to deliver a piece of change. They're never the right way to get a strategy off the ground. Because you end up skipping vision setting, you don't engage the right people, you don't check that the outcomes that are needed are truly going to take the organisation in the direction that's required. You don't check that you've got the right money on the table for it. You don't check they've got the right team structure, all of this stuff, because it's done in panic. It's a knee-jerk reaction. That ends up being a huge flurry of activity and ultimately no clear end game. So you lack that validation and you end up wasting a huge amount of time and money, ultimately going in the wrong direction. So if it's a knee-jerk reaction, it seems to have come out of nowhere and it's not being truly validated. Really needs to go back to the starting block. You need to stop and ask, what is that long-term destination and why are we truly making this change? Again, it comes down to the as is and the to be state. Validating a vision, testing it with stakeholders, and truly questioning whether this new approach will deliver the results needed for long-term sustainable growth. Number 8, please, Jen. This is a big one, no plan for sustainability. So many project life cycles are set up, and we see it in PMO all the time, to deliver a project, to get it from business case through to closure. The project closes, the project team disband, the project manager moves on, but no change has actually been embedded. They've not actually considered, how do we ensure this change is sustainably embedded into the organisation? So let's take an example, bring this to life a little bit. A new customer contact system is launched successfully. The project is a success, delivers on time, delivers on budget. It hands over to the business as usual team and the project closes. Project manager moves on to a new project, the team disbands. But what about those benefits? Because you don't reap the rewards until the system is fully embedded. Colleagues are managing it with ease and customers are enjoying the seamless process. You could be 6 months down the line before those benefits start to trickle through. And even then, let's be honest, they were theoretical. They theoretically lined up and all the validation lined up when you did the business case. But until those benefits actually come through, you don't truly know that the change has been realised. And it's really easy for an organisation and a sponsor, particularly a business owner, to be lulled into a false sense of security because a project is successfully delivered, forgetting that there is also work to successfully embed the change. Because if you don't embed, reinforce and track the adoption and the change that's being delivered, there is a risk that people will revert back to what was comfortable. And what was comfortable is what they were doing previously, if that's an option. And there's also a risk that there were further activities needed to embed the change that you weren't aware of when you closed the project, for example. So how do you continue to track that? For example, the business lead, they could be hugely passionate and they could leave the organisation 3 weeks after the project goes live. And what would that do for successfully embedding? So embed and sustain must be built into every project lifecycle. And PMO, really keeping them at the heart of it, is ideal for this because they will oversee embed and sustain activities. And as part of closure, that embed and sustain process would initially be led by the project manager at the point of closure, but then it would hand over to the business lead and the PMO for oversight. And this is the benefits realisation plan. So what benefits do we expect to see and what activities need to happen within the organisation in order to ensure these benefits are realised and that change is successfully embedded? And are there any risks that the action owner, the business lead, needs to keep a track of? We often see risks and actions put into a project closure report, but realistically, project closure report gets filed away when the project manager leaves. What you need is a trackable document in Excel, for example, simple as Excel, that the business owner takes accountability for, and they know what actions they need to deliver, what actions they need to oversee, and what benefits they should be seeing. And if they're not seeing them, what do they need to do about it? And if any projects have closed and you do have a PMO function, I would strongly recommend completing a health check on sustainability of those projects that have closed within the last 6 months, even within the last year, to see if the benefits of those projects have been realised and if they have been successfully embedded, or whether further action is needed and whether any of them need reopening. Point 9, please, Jen. And this is the last one before we move into PMO. Yes, lessons learned, 100% Zishan, very, very important. Really important for continuous improvement. Okay, poor leadership alignment. So this meaningful change at scale requires often various senior leaders to be aligned, not just aware of the project, aware of the change, know it's happening, but practically committed to it. Because if you don't have that executive and senior leadership and championing of the project, then there's a real risk that actually it doesn't get the resources it needs, it doesn't get the funding it needs, it doesn't get the escalations to remove blockers, and it's just not prioritised. So right at the beginning, when you're thinking about stakeholder engagement, it's about understanding which leaders need to be fully aligned to this change and making sure they're aligned to it, and also aware of what they need to commit to in order to, from their part, contribute towards the project. Very importantly, just as we talked about sustainability there, when that project phase ends, so the project has been delivered, team is disbanding, that alignment of your senior leaders, that accountability cannot fade. It needs to continue through as you go through embed and sustain of that change. Because otherwise there is a significant risk that those changes will start to unravel. So make sure, whether you're at the beginning, the middle, or even close to the end of your change, that you've aligned leadership and keep them aligned for the rest of your delivery. And make visible commitments. Make sure they're committed to what they're responsible for delivering, so they know what they're accountable for and they're committed to it. And revisit that alignment regularly, holding people to account to deliver those outcomes, not just outputs. And when everything wraps up, ensure that there's still someone there leading the charge, because otherwise things can fall by the wayside and the organisation to deliver the project benefits that were intended because it falls by the wayside. So that leadership alignment is very, very important. Right, we're going to move on to the subject of PMO now, which really is point 10, but I felt like it deserved its own title. The role of PMO and why is it so important in the world of delivering projects and change. I mentioned at the beginning about PMO being really vital when it comes to connecting your projects to change and your change to strategy. PMO should be the custodians of that golden thread. They should provide the capability for projects to define and identify what their golden thread is, and they should be overseeing and assuring throughout delivery that that project is staying true and aligned to the golden thread. That means that the PMO needs to stay well connected to the vision and strategy of an organisation. And if that changes, that does need to trickle down to the projects that they have on the portfolio, which means they need a seat at the decision-making table, or at least need someone that's representing and championing the PMO at the decision-making table, at that executive table. So PMOs are the heavy lifting of strategy realisation. Really good, strong PMOs perform this role. They turn strategy into change, and that change into reality. And it requires discipline, detail, and coordination. So yes, the risk log is still needed. Yes, the gateways and health checks are still required, but because it's keeping accountability up to strategy. So the PMO, or the equivalent, we're seeing more and more organisations use a different term. Instead of PMO, strategy office, transformation team, project office. Anything really other than PMO people, it's particularly if they have any negative connotations with the PMO, they're looking at new terms. But ultimately, as long as the principles hold true, does not matter what you call it. The principles of the PMO are what truly matter, and they are responsible for day-to-day orchestration and ultimate accountability to the strategy. PMO is more than just reporting. The PMO is not a passive update function. It acts as the organisation's air traffic control. When you're in an aeroplane and you're on your way to Mallorca, wherever you may be going, if there is an issue with that plane and that pilot reports back to the air traffic control centre to let them know they are likely to be delayed or they're facing significant turbulence, the air traffic control doesn't say, "Great, thanks for letting us know, we'll report it back." They get that plane back on track. They tell the plane whether they can drop height, whether they can increase height. They do it because they know where other planes are. If that plane is going to land late, they make sure that's passed through to the next airspace so that they can understand the impact on the runway. They do something with the information that is given to them. They protect that plane, they keep it safely in the air, and they prevent any impact to any other planes that are landing, taking off, or also flying in that airspace. And that is what a PMO function should do as well. They establish and maintain the golden thread between strategy and delivery. They have key responsibilities. They track budget, risks, dependencies, plans, resources, because ultimately it's all about keeping those projects on track, keeping those planes in the air. They prevent issues through structured governance, escalation routes, and regular check-ins, and they ensure alignment and progress across the entire portfolio of projects. The other role they perform is supporting executives. They make sure strategic leaders are shaping the vision and not getting bogged down by the detail. And then the PMO focuses on direction and decision making. The PMO allows strategic executives, leaders of organisations to focus on direction and decision making while they manage progress and alignment. Next slide, please, Jen. And that stops strategic leaders getting pulled into the weeds, getting too focused on project level details. Without having a PMO, projects lose alignment with overall strategy, which ultimately does affect outcomes. Scope can get cut, costs will increase, timelines stretch. All of these things, scope, time, budget, resource, imbalances, everything that a project will face, the challenges that they face, the PMO is accountable for keeping all those things on track. And without them, projects struggle and they don't have anywhere to go to get help and escalation. The golden thread, the PMO is accountable for the golden thread between strategy and execution. And if that thread begins to fray, undermining the ability to realise the change needed, the PMO gets it back on track. Without the PMO, you might start with the most amazing strategy. You could have the best individuals defining that strategy, understanding the golden thread, connecting your projects and your programs, and you might get off to a fantastic start. But 6 months down the line, things change. Every one of us has been involved in projects, and we all know things change when a project gets started. And if you've not got your PMO or a function overseeing and protecting that golden thread, then things become disconnected. So of course, what's the solution? Well, you make sure you deliver a PMO. You have a PMO overseeing everything. You can call it transformation office, you can call it strategy office, you can call it PMO, you can call it whatever you want. The function must have a clear mandate to manage and protect the strategy to delivery process. This allows executives and leaders to focus on the big picture while the PMO ensures alignment, progress, and results. The PMO supports the project managers and they support the sponsors and the leaders as well, and everything in between. The PMO is really important, hence why we started Prospect Change. We're huge advocates for PMO and we continue to bang the PMO drum. And I think this leads us into our group discussion. And I'm really intrigued and looking forward to hearing everybody's thoughts, questions, challenges, etc. So we can probably stop sharing the slides now, Jen, if that's